you're not going to believe me, but I have solved the problem that is on so many people's minds. How to be more happy. And in this episode, I am going to tell you how to solve all of your problems and be happy all of the time. I cannot wait to share this episode with you. My name is Morgan Motzinger, and this is the PS We Expire podcast, and I'm so glad that you're here. Okay, how to be more happy. Here it is. Make more money, have more sex, have children, find the perfect person, have a job you can't wait to go to, have friends that agree with you, only see news that makes you feel good, have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram who all only ever say nice, encouraging things to you and tell you how amazing you are. All right, episode over. Go forth and make that happen. Oh man. Okay. So I'm guessing that the intro didn't fool any of you when I said that I have the secret to how to be more happy. And really, I think what people are really asking is this question: how do I be happy all the time? How do I avoid pain? How do I avoid grief? How do I avoid being sad? Because nobody likes to feel crappy. Nobody likes to feel less than amazing. So what I want to talk about today are a couple of really actually tangible, practical things that you can do to increase your happiness and life satisfaction. And I also want to talk about two things that have to do with our mindset around happiness. So I'm going to talk about the really practical things first that really do bolster our happiness and our sense of life satisfaction. And this is from studies that have happened. This is anecdotal evidence. This is a result of things that I've tested out in my own life and that I have found to bring me more joy and happiness in my life. And then I'll get into some of the mindset and psychological sides of things. By the way, I do think that what I said about how to be more happy, all of those things would be great to have those things. And there's nothing wrong with wanting any of the things on that list. But I want to talk about because that can't happen, let's talk about what can happen and what we do have control over. So number one, play. Last night we were playing this game with our children. So my kids are 7 and 12, and they're still at the ages where poop jokes and boogers and, all that kind of stuff is just hilarious. And we played a card game called Parent Not Approved or something like that. And it's kind of like apples to apples where, the one person has a card that's like a fill in the blank, and then everybody looks at the stuff on their cards and throws it in the pile. And then, it's decided on by the judge. And I won because I am really good at getting into the mindset of a 7 and 12-year-old child, apparently, and know the things that are funny to them, because I also find them funny myself. One of the best shifts for me that have just made me a happier person is just stop taking myself so damn seriously all the time. I had this belief for a while, particularly around the work that I was doing, that if I was going to be like a goofball, that I wouldn't be taken seriously. And I guess I don't really know why that would have been a problem, but I think it probably had something to do with people trusting me with projects, people being willing to pay me for my expertise if I acted playful and silly, if I acted too happy or joyful or whatever, that people would think that I was irresponsible and kind of flighty. And I have made a really lovely shift into just understanding that, God, we take things so seriously so much of the time. And if we can adopt more of a mindset of play and actually start playing, things will change for us. So it's like a journey into becoming less self-conscious, less conscious of what other people think of us, and more tapped into just the joy of having fun. I went to a yoga class this last weekend, and the yoga instructor is this really lovely woman who has really studied yoga, not just in, like the kind of like the workout sense and the poses, but really studied the philosophy of yoga. And she applies that into the sessions that she leads. And we, at the beginning of class, she put tissues next to everybody's yoga mats. And she said, it's not for crying, which, I mean, I cry anytime I have a really good yoga session anyway, but she said it's because we're going to get kind of like juicy today. And it's because she led us through some of these exercises where we were doing this like horse breath, where we just like let our mouths, let the spit fly, and let our cheeks be loose, and let all of that loosen up in our faces. And then we were doing, anytime you do like lion's breath, where you have to have your mouth open really wide and your tongue sticking out. And she had us doing breathing where we would inhale really big, and on the exhale, we would just let out the sounds that were coming out. And she was talking about, I don't know, like, I can't remember what the context was of this, but something about like a dog doing something like a dog. And I just like was barking and it made everybody laugh. It made me laugh. And doing like the horse breath with my lips flying everywhere, and knowing that other people can see me while I am being having some things not in my control, or maybe looking stupid or looking silly or being a little bit embarrassing. These are all practices that help us loosen up our grip on what other people think of us, and also help us remember that, like, yeah, we're all kind of just like these awkward humans moving around in this existence, and a lot of times not knowing how things are going to go. And it was a really lovely thing in class, in that yoga class, to let myself be less inhibited. And a dear friend of mine who goes to that yoga class with me is a musician through and through. And I could hear her behind me singing along with the music. And it felt like it gave me permission to sing along as well, that it introduced such a flavor of playfulness into the whole practice. And if yoga, in a session of yoga, the philosophy around it is like, how do you be this person who understands the interconnectedness of all things, our breath, our bodies, and also the way that we live our life? How can we integrate the lessons that we learn in a yoga class to the rest of our lives? And I love this introduction of playfulness. And years ago, my brother told me this quote that just rolls around in my head quite a lot. He said that nothing's embarrassing if you're not embarrassed. Nothing's embarrassing if you're not embarrassed. What I love about that is that it turns the gaze back onto oneself, and realizing that we can feel however we feel, regardless of how other people feel about what we're doing, if that makes sense. So if I'm doing something that someone might say that's embarrassing, but I don't feel on my insides that I'm embarrassed, it's not embarrassing. It's not embarrassing. My sister started this business a while ago, which I absolutely love so much, where she helps women rediscover the power of play. There is a ton of research on what play does in our lives, in our psyches. And here's the thing that I think is really powerful about play. I've already talked a little bit about like how it makes you it can help you become less self-conscious, but also playing introduces this element of exploration and curiosity about your own mind, about how your body moves, about how you feel about things. And play allows you to tap into creative problem solving in a way that other things don't necessarily. So if you can remember being a child and being on the playground set, and you've got these monkey bars, and maybe you can't quite reach them. So you're going to find a different way to play with that structure, or, if you see someone climbing on it a certain way, or maybe all the kids are climbing on it a certain way, and your brain says, I want to try and do it differently. This is the mentality that play brings into our life. And I guarantee you that when you start playing, even when it is uncomfortable, it brings so much joy and happiness. Some of what I will say is part of play is bringing movement back into your life. And many people will say that exercise obviously like makes a lot of like hormonal things happen in your bodies in a really positive way that increases endorphins and helps you feel better. It helps you, process stress in your body, helps you sleep better, which definitely impacts your mental health. But I also would say that if we only think about it in terms of like exercising and we don't bring play along with it, then we're going to miss out on what body movement can actually bring to our lives. So if I went to the gym and I had this mindset of like, oh, got to get this done, I don't really want to be here, but I know it's good for me, it's good for my stupid health, and I was doing that, I'm missing out on the opportunity to explore and reap the full benefits of what movement does for me. And so when I bring this idea of play into my workout and I challenge myself and I, want to one up myself from last week when I was only able to do this many reps or with this much weight, if I bring the play into it, it just makes me that much happier about the activity that I'm doing. So that's number one, is bring play into your life. Let yourself off the hook from taking things so damn seriously all the time. Introduce this silliness and this curiosity and this play into your life. Even if you're just out on a walk, just find ways to play in your environment. Maybe walk on the curb or do a little parkour move off of a tree or, something like that. Introduce play into your life. Number two is get connected. Get connected. In our Western culture, there is this really, really insidious kind of like ideology around being hyper independent, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, making things happen for yourself. And it really is a problem because we are social species. We're a social species. We absolutely rely on other people. And there is no way for us to disconnect how we feel from how the other people in our lives feel. It's impossible. There's a lot of studies that have centered around understanding how organisms act in a petri dish by themselves, how cells behave. And what many researchers are discovering now is that doesn't give us a full picture of cell behavior. This doesn't give us a full understanding of what's actually happening in like the gut microbiome, or is happening with cancer cells, or is happening in all of these other ways, because nothing lives in a vacuum. Nothing does ever live in a petri dish by itself. We are all interconnected organisms. And so if we neglect paying attention to who is in our life, this can really dramatically impact our happiness and our life satisfaction. The people in our lives are massively important. So you got to start asking yourself these questions about, are the people in my life supportive of me? Are they keeping you doing the same things that you've always done? Are they resistant to change? Are they resistant to your change? People are resistant to change. Well, all of us are. Some of us just become more adept at dealing with the discomfort of what comes as a result of change. So change is scary for our primitive brains because we like what is familiar. We like what is the same. We like what we can predict. That is what our brains are really good at, is predicting the next thing that's going to happen. So change is very, very, very scary to our brains. It's really scary. And if you think about what happens then when you're in relationship with someone and you are changing, you are threatening that other person's reliability on the patterns that they've established in their own mind about who you are, what they can expect of you, what they can predict that you're going to do. They know how to behave in relation to how you've always behaved. And so when you change, there are going to be people in your life who may be very, 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 very resistant to that. It could even be something that is healthy for you that other people are resistant to you doing. So I think a really good example of this is when someone decides to change how they're eating, or they decide to change their relationship with alcohol. So the friends that they have gone out with, they, eat certain things, and they, perhaps drink together all the time. And when that person starts to change how they eat and they stop drinking, or they're drinking less, or maybe they're only drinking on the weekends or something like that, there can be so much resistance from friends. And you have to recognize that it's not about you. It's about threatening their perception of your identity. And sometimes getting connected in service of being happy and in service of having a joyful life means that you have to first get disconnected from people that are no longer a good fit for you. This doesn't mean that you have to go and like chop, 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 chop all the ties. Sometimes you just have to gently untie, or you have to change the agreements that you have in those relationships. And sometimes people will not be able to work through their own shit enough to go along with you as you change and as you improve your life, as you improve your health, as you improve your mental fitness. Some people are not going to be able to come along with you. And that sucks. It really does. And it's really hard and it's really difficult. But if you are going to be more happy in your life, you have to create connections with people who love you unconditionally, who are able to see past their own preferences and their own judgments, that can shift and adjust with you, and that can see your changes as a positive thing. You have to have people in your life like that. If you are feeling lonely, even though you have a lot of people in your life, it's time to start making some other connections. And I recognize that this is hard because it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of vulnerability to put yourself out there again. And I'm not even talking about like in the realms of dating. I'm just saying things like even making friendships as an adult is such a weird thing. It takes a lot of courage to invite someone into your life again, and to not know if they're going to like you or how they're going to feel about you, or if your goals or your hobbies are going to align or not. But I have found that my happiness in life has gone up so much when I have noticed the relationships that when I hang out with that person, that I come away from it just feeling lit up and feeling seen and feeling understood, and that I come away from our interactions with a greater sense of hope and possibility for the future. And what I started doing is like noticing those relationships and just spending more time with those people. And it's not even the people that always have positive things to say and don't ever have their own stuff that they're working on and always, pat me on the back and never challenge me. Those are not the relationships that I'm talking about, but it's the relationships really where I can see that the other person is doing introspective work and is doing has an interest in the same kinds of things that I do, as far as like just becoming more of myself, and that they encourage me to be me authentically. It is such a gift. It's such a gift. And so since we have a limited amount of time and energy that we can pour into our relationships, it's time to get picky. Get really picky about the people that you're spending time with. And this may mean that you have to be lonely for a little bit as the old relationships have gone and the new relationships have not come yet. You might have a gap of loneliness where you have to expend more energy to just put yourself out there and try and meet people and try and start to establish friendships. But it makes a huge difference to have people in your life that love and support you in that way. The third practical thing to be more happy is to take a break. Some of this is just to slow down, be present, pay attention to the things around you. And some of this is really practically just take a break from social media, take a break from the news. I don't watch the news. I'm going to share something really fascinating with you about this here in just a second, but just really practically, if there is something that happens that you need to know, I guarantee you that someone will tell you about it directly or that it will come across your path without spending time really watching the news. The way that we live right now with technology, and I know this is not going to come as a surprise to any of you, but for the majority of human history, we had no idea what was happening on the other side of the world. Zero idea. We barely had any idea what was happening like 3 cities away or 1 town away. We knew what was happening in our close circles. We knew what was happening in our communities. And we live in a very difficult time where we have access to so much information, and the news media companies are only interested in one thing. They are interested in monopolizing your attention. That is why the news cycle is just full of awful things happening, because they know that our brains naturally are wired to pay attention to threat, to pay attention to things that are going to impact our safety. And so since that is the case, they're going to take advantage of that and be showing things that keep us fixated on things that we feel like may be a threat to us, even though something that's happening across the world is never going to actually impact us ever. This is not a call to just put your head in the sand and ignore everything that's happening in the world. But if you're not going to do something about the thing that you're hearing about, if you aren't going to take any practical steps to try and alleviate suffering, to try and, address a particular cause, to really do something about it, it's okay for you to not pay attention to it. It's okay. I hereby give you permission to turn the news off and not know what's happening in the world. I know, I think that that's probably going to ruffle some feathers because, God, there's a lot of terrible things that happen in the world. But what I really have come to decide and understand is that if I'm going to continue to input things that are hard, that are human suffering, that are things that I cannot do anything about, I am filling up my heart and I'm filling up my emotional life with problems that have no solutions that I can meaningfully be a part of. And it's just a dead end. So I've given myself permission to not pay attention, intentionally not pay attention. And the more that I don't pay attention, the easier it is to not see it. And like I said, I guarantee you that if something is important, that you will notice it. You will notice it and you will do something about it. Someone will tell you about it. You'll know. When it comes to social media, it's the same kind of thing. Like just knowing what our brains are wired for, and also knowing what the motivation is for social media companies to be all about keeping your attention on the platform as long as humanly possible. It's so important to take breaks from that. And I struggle with this one a lot. I'll be totally honest with you. I really, really struggle to not spend a ridiculous amount of time on Instagram. And I think everybody has their platform of choice. Some people it's YouTube Shorts. They're on Twitter, X. They're on, I mean, is Clubhouse even a thing anymore? I don't know. TikTok is big. Everybody kind of has their thing. And it's not your fault that you are putting so much of your mental energy towards these things, because they really have like the corner on the dopamine market, I guess I would say, that they have tapped into some of our most primal wiring for us to pay attention and to be on those platforms. And so, sometimes you just have to take like really concrete steps towards cutting yourself off from that a bit. So I have decided that, and this happens frequently. This isn't like I'm not super disciplined perfectly at it, but I delete the Instagram app off of my phone and I tell myself I'm only allowed to check Instagram on my computer. So that keeps me from doing it all the time. That keeps me from getting it on. That keeps me from getting on it all the time. And even this is how sneaky our brains are about doing things that feel good to us, even though we know they're not good for us. Is that I would get on, my internet browser app and get into Instagram. And I finally had to log myself out of it, delete the app off of my phone. And it's still such a challenge for me not to just reinstall the app and get back on. This does take deliberate choice to unhook ourselves from things that we know that we need to take a break from. Then the part of this that I said about just slowing down, this is such an important part of increasing our happiness, is that practicing the power of true presence makes life just, it turns the dial up on the brightness of life, if that makes sense. I shared this on my Instagram stories or reels, but I wanted to share it with you here as well, that I took a walk the other day in this really beautiful nature reserve area close to my house. And I'm walking on this trail, and the trail ends at the bay. So looking out over the bay that's connected with the Pacific Ocean. And I sat down on a log and I was just ruminating on things in my life that are difficult right now, and thinking, I wish that I wasn't here at this, at this juncture in my life, at this spot in my life, dealing with what I'm dealing with. And I looked around at where I was in this amazing, beautiful nature area, looking at the water and the trees and the grass and all the things and the insects. And I realized that me saying, I wish I wasn't here, can't actually apply, because where I was in that moment was exactly where I wanted to be. And it reminded me again that the past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist. All we have is right now, this moment, this one right now, this one, now this one, now this one. This is all that we have. And this isn't to say that we shouldn't think about the choices that we've made and pay attention to our patterns in the past, or that we don't do any future planning or forecasting what's going to happen or making decisions that are going to positively impact us down the road. I'm not saying that at all, but what I am saying is that so often we spend so much time in those other places, or we spend our time in this, I don't even know what to call where our minds go when we watch the news or spend time on social media, but we're not being very present. It's taking us away from being in this present moment right now, looking at what is happening around me right now. Right now. You can't be anywhere other than where you are right now. And slowing down and paying attention to what is happening in your life right now, spending time with the people that you care about without distracting yourself with your phone, spending time playing with your kids, even though I don't know about any of you that have children. I don't know if this is the case for you, but like how hard imaginative play is with kids. Or they've got their, little Lego characters or dolls or whatever, and they're telling you what the doll should say, and they're completely cramping your style when it comes to playing. Okay. Anyway, but finding ways to really practice being very, very present turns up the dial on happiness for sure. I have already talked about some of the mindset that goes along with these very practical tips, but now I want to talk about two really important mindset pieces. The first one is that we need to get better at just learning how to feel. We need to learn how to feel. So maybe the problem really isn't that we're not very happy, but that we suck at feeling whatever it is that we're actually feeling. So I was thinking about this concept of these numbing behaviors that we all participate in. When we feel terrible about something, we feel anxious about something, and we, cram things in our mouth, or we engage in certain behaviors, whether they're, risky or not, or we, use our phones as a way to distract ourselves from what we're feeling. Brene Brown has a lot of research to back this up, that you cannot selectively numb your emotions. So when we're engaging in behaviors that numb the emotions that feel uncomfortable, we are simultaneously numbing the feelings that feel great, that we're getting ourselves into this like weird kind of like neutral zone where everything just kind of feels blah. And that is not living. So we need to get better at feeling everything that we're feeling, to feeling the edges of the highs and the lows, that we stop numbing ourselves, running away from, escaping the lows, because we know that if we do that, we also are decreasing our ability to feel the highs. It kind of makes me think of like when a patient has a surgery and they're in the hospital, and the staff has given them this, a little clicker to be able to deliver more pain medication. And obviously they like put a ceiling on that, so you can't dose yourself with higher than, what is actually healthy for you, that's not going to kill you. But that the patient has control over pushing the button to administer more pain medication. And I was thinking about like how much I do that with this thing, how much I do that with my phone. Like I'm treating it like a little pain button. Like I'm a patient, and I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. I don't want to feel the emotional discomfort. And so I'm getting my button here and I'm pushing it. I'm getting onto the apps or whatever and administering these numbing agents to myself. And I have to believe that the more that we learn how to stop doing that, not in the context of when you're in the hospital and you're in physical pain, but maybe that's an implication of this too, that the better we get at that, the happier we are, because we are then able to feel happy. We're able to feel happy, and not artificially through this little black box of dopamine dumps, but that we are able to feel genuine satisfaction and curiosity and awe and sadness and grief and anger and all of the things that make us be human, that make us human, all the things that make us human. Part of learning to feel is allowing yourself to be bored. That's part of this too, is that we have so much stimulation and distraction that keep us from being introspective, that keep us from feeling whatever we're feeling, that we have to allow ourselves to be bored. Often my children will come to me and they'll be like, I'm so bored. Why don't you let me, get on my electronics or whatever? And sometimes I will offer up things that they could do. And they're always say, no, no, no. Oftentimes I'll just tell them good. And I know that in about 10 to 15 minutes, they will have found something to do. Apart from like the quick, easy, cheap distractions. So they'll, play with their toys or do an art project or go outside and play with their friends. And oftentimes, because we don't have someone else telling us, no, you can't do that thing, we have lost the ability to be bored. We'll be standing in the grocery store line and pull our phones out because we're used to not having to just be bored while we're waiting. So like introduce these little opportunities in your life to just be bored, to just wait and look and watch and be present. Have a conversation with someone, instead of distracting yourself. Learn how to be bored. But really, the bigger message here is learn how to feel. And then the last one, maybe I should have started with this one, but I think you kind of got the gist of it when I made a joke about that how to be happy was to have more money and sex and all of that stuff. This is change your mind. So we already know that a pursuit of happiness is a fool's errand because we know that nobody's going to be happy all the time. We know that, and yet we still pursue that like that's a possibility. So I want you to think about this in a different way. Instead of saying, I want to be more happy, and that's not a bad goal. Okay. But what if you change your mind and you start to say things like, I want to be more healthy. I want to be more whole. I want to be more feeling. I want to be more present. What if we stop making happy our end goal? Because really, the goal of being happy is just the goal to feel good all the time. And the reality is that if we felt good all the time, at some point it would stop feeling good. It would just feel neutral because there's no contrast if we feel good all the time. The most obvious example I can think of with this, and if you have little children in the car listening to this episode with them, you might want to plug their ears or, put headphones in or whatever. But the most obvious one I can think of is like how amazing an orgasm feels. But what if you felt orgasms all day long? That would be terrible. Sorry for shouting. That would be terrible. I remember a handful of years ago seeing a clip of a documentary for this woman who had some type of nerve damage or something. I can't remember why, but this poor woman had orgasms all day long, like every 5 to 10 minutes. And she was miserable. She was miserable. And that just reminds me that like we don't actually want to be happy all the time. As much as that sounds amazing, we don't actually want that. What we want is to experience the highs and the lows. We want to experience the full spectrum of human emotion. And if we have this lofty goal of feeling happy all the time, then we will be in a constant state, a perpetual state of resistance to what is. Because if I'm thinking that I need to be or I deserve to be happy all the time, I'm going to push away anything that doesn't feel good. And that's not what we're here for. And that also is impossible to get out of anything that doesn't feel good, particularly if you are interested in growth. If you are interested in becoming more alive, if you are interested in becoming more of who you really are, you cannot be in a state of resistance to things that don't feel good because change is discomfort. Growth is uncomfortable. It's the price to pay. It's the price to pay. And the more familiar and comfortable you get with feeling uncomfortable, and one of the ways that you can do that is to adopt an attitude of play. But the more that you become open and willing to feel uncomfortable, the closer and closer the life of your dreams gets to your reality. There's that you stop scrambling out of situations and you just let things be as they are and make choices based on that. It's so much better. It's so much better. The challenge to create a more satisfactory life, which does include more happiness, I would say, is a worthwhile pursuit. And it starts by paying attention. Pay attention to how you really feel about things. Pay attention to your relationships. Pay attention to the connections that you're making. Pay attention to how you're spending your time and your energy and your attention. Pay attention to the things that you think about, what you deserve and what you're owed and what you think that life should look like. Pay attention to your curiosity. Pay attention to play. And start really taking hold of a life that just is full of feeling, that you get better at feeling, that you feel better. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me for this episode. And I do hope that you do feel more joy and more happiness in your life. And I know I'll say this just to close this out. I know that for some of you, that feels very, very far away because you have been dealing with things like depression, that you have been dealing with some really deep grief and heartache. And I want to encourage you that even the hardest things are still just temporary, that there is hope and potential for you to not feel like this forever. So if you need additional help, reach out to a therapist, reach out to a trusted friend, someone that you can tell how you're really doing and that you can unshame how you're doing, how you're feeling about things, and that you can get the support and the connection that you need to not want to escape from your life. So, all right, that's all I have for today. But before we go, P.S. We expire.